Hello students, today we are going to study about pharmacovigilance. This subject is a division of pharmacoepidemiology and is a very important component of pharmacological sciences. The agenda for today's session is to understand the definition, aims, and the methods in pharmacovigilance as per ICH GCP guidelines. Before we understand the definition, it is important to know that pharmacovigilance, this very term, has been derived from two Greek terms. First is pharmakon, which means a drug, and vigilan, which means to keep a watch. So basically or essentially, pharmacovigilance literally means to keep a watch on the drugs. Pharmacovigilance is a science and activities related to the detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects or any other drug-related problem. Now, the question is, why do you need such a science to monitor adverse events? That is because when you develop a new molecule, theoretically, you aim for 100% efficacy and 0% side effects. However, if you look at the real world evidence, you will see that every drug has adverse effects. Sometimes it could be life-threatening, or sometimes it could compromise the quality of life. In lab environment or even in clinical trial, investigations are done in a controlled environment, and it is difficult to estimate or predict adverse events. Therefore, there is a need for pharmacovigilance. We have so far seen the definition of pharmacovigilance. Let us now understand the aims of pharmacovigilance. So this science is aimed to detect quickly some unknown adverse reactions so that precautions can be taken when they are prescribed to people. If the event is life-threatening, some decision can be taken regarding withdrawal to prevent further harm. Secondly, to identify risk factors and mechanism of adverse reactions. For example, the response of a drug may vary depending on whether you have some underlying disease or depending on some genetic mutations which may alter the rate of metabolism of that particular drug. So in such a scenario, it is important that these details must be identified so that even before that drug produces toxicity in such a patient, the necessary precautions might be taken. The third important aspect is a risk-benefit analysis. So risk-benefit analysis requires a sound technical knowledge both about the disease as well as the drug. So say for example, if you have two drugs, let us call them as drug A and drug B. So this drug A is developed for the treatment of pneumonia and drug B is developed for the treatment of rabies. These two drugs, that is drug A and drug B, produce a common side effect, which is an increase in the blood pressure. Now, if you have to decide about the future of this particular two drugs based on the number of adverse events that have been reported, then in that case, it is very important for you to consider that even though they have a common side effect, that is increase in blood pressure, drug A is indicated for pneumonia which can be cured or for which cure is available. There are other drug therapies which are available. Whereas for drug B, It is indicated for rabies. Now, there is no clinical cure for rabies once the disease has progressed. So, in that case, if you assess the risk that is associated and you compare that with the benefit that is associated with the drug, you will find that the benefit of drug B, which is used for treatment of rabies, is much more as compared to drug A, which is used for the treatment of pneumonia. So you have to take these factors into consideration when you do a risk-benefit analysis. So in summary, this risk-benefit analysis is not entirely based on how many adverse events are reported, but it also takes into consideration for what particular therapeutic indication the drug is used. So all these aspects are taken into consideration. The next important point is that the information or the dissemination of information. Now, whatever information is available on adverse events that is associated with that particular drug should be available in public domain. Now, why is that necessary? So, when a drug is prescribed in one corner of the world and an adverse event occurs, it is important that this information is made available in public domain so that physicians, researchers across the world may have access to it and they can streamline strategies pertaining to prescription of that drug and how to deal with the adverse events associated with that particular drug. So these are some 4 important objectives which are fulfilled by pharmacovigilance. So far we have seen the definition of pharmacovigilance, we have seen the aims of pharmacovigilance. Now let us understand the methods that are used in pharmacovigilance as per ICH GCP guidelines. Now if we look at the methods in pharmacovigilance, the classification of these methods is based on ICH GCP guidelines. Now, pharmacovigilance is covered in the efficacy component of the ICH GCP guidelines. Another system of classification is based on hypothesis. We will see them one by one, and as we progress, you will note that there is an overlap between classification based on ICH GCP and one based on hypothesis. Now, based on the guidelines, there are 6 important methods in pharmacovigilance. First, I will just read it out to you and then one by one we will understand them. So first type is passive surveillance. The second type is stimulated reporting. Third type is active reporting. The next type is comparative observational study. The fifth type is targeted clinical investigation, and the sixth type is descriptive studies. Now one by one we will understand what is done in each of these methods. So to quickly summarize the 6 major types, remember the methods are passive surveillance, stimulated reporting, active surveillance, comparative observational study, targeted clinical investigation, and descriptive studies. So now let us start with the first type of method of pharmacovigilance as per ICH GCP. This method is called passive reporting or passive surveillance. Now the term passive means without active response. In the context of pharmacovigilance, it means that no active measures are taken to report the adverse effects, but rather the onus of reporting entirely lies with the potential reporter. Now this potential reporter could be a patient, a physician, or any healthcare provider like a pharmacist who voluntarily reports the adverse events. So remember, in this type of method, there is voluntary reporting of the adverse event by a potential reporter. Now let us understand passive reporting in greater detail. So you have considered a healthcare provider. Now this healthcare provider could be a doctor, a nurse, or a pharmacist. Now this healthcare provider is a potential reporter who voluntarily reports a adverse event. Okay. So this reporting of adverse event could be done using a form. It could be done through telephone, email, fax, or internet. Now the form, in case if it is used, this form could be a particular form that is customized as per the requirement of that country. For example, this form could be in the local language of that particular country or region. Also, whenever this form is developed or used for adverse event reporting, it should be developed in such a way that the language is easy to understand and fill. Now, this reporting of adverse event is done by the healthcare professional to a pharmacovigilance center. Now, in India, we have Pharmacovigilance Program of India, which is also known as PVPI. Now, this central body has several reporting centers throughout the country. For example, in the West Zone, you have KM Hospital, which is one of the center. In the South Zone, there is some other hospital. So on and so forth, there are different centers. So for example, if some healthcare provider from Mumbai has to report an adverse event, then in that case, they will report it to KM Hospital, which is the Pharmacovigilance Center. Now, this reporting is done immediately after an adverse event occurs. Based on the reporting of this adverse event, a report is generated. Now, this report that is generated, it is generated in a specific manner. So, the contents of this report are: first, essential data elements. Now, what is included in this essential data elements? Patient demographics, what type of drug was taken, what type of adverse event was seen, what was the time when the adverse event was observed after taking the drug. All these details are noted in essential data elements. The second important component of the report is advice to reporters. So what is included in this advice to reporters? The information about adverse events that are of concern should be reported. This advice is given to the reporters. Now, what is adverse event that is of concern? So, those adverse events that result in death, life-threatening condition, or which cause permanent disability are called as adverse events of concern. So, these are to be reported and this advice is given to the reporters. The third important component is follow-up, which includes details of re-challenge and de-challenge, details of the laboratory test reports. Now, what is re-challenge and what is de-challenge, we are going to understand later in the subsequent slides. Now, whatever details are generated in this report should be sent to the WHO Collaborating Center, that is the Collaborating Center of World Health Organization, which is nothing but the Uppsala Monitoring Center. So all these data entries, whatever are there, they can be completed using some softwares, like for example, very commonly used software is Vigiflow software. Now this is an online software which is developed by the Uppsala Monitoring Center, which is of the WHO. It is very easy to use and it has an inbuilt system which allows for error-free data entry. So in this way, the entire process of passive reporting is completed. The next important method in pharmacovigilance is stimulated reporting. Now the very term stimulate means to encourage. So stimulated reporting basically is a reporting that is encouraged by some publication or data that is made available in public domain. For example, if there is some life-threatening adverse effect that is detected, then in that case, FDA may publish a notification about that particular adverse event. Post that notification, there will be an increase in the number of similar adverse events which will be reported. So this type of reporting is therefore called stimulated reporting. Why? Because the reporting of that particular adverse event is stimulated by the publication of a notification by FDA. We now move on to the next method as per ICH GCP guideline, that is active surveillance. Now active surveillance, in this, the very term active means that measures are taken proactively to detect adverse events. So how exactly do you do that? By taking active follow-up after treatment from the patients. So how will you exactly achieve that? So this is achieved by different types of methods. So first is sentinel surveillance. So to achieve sentinel surveillance, you have something called as sentinel sites. Now this system is used when high quality data is required about a particular disease and which cannot be obtained through a passive system. So you have certain sites that are designated, and from these sites you collect the data on adverse events and data pertaining to a particular disease. For example, say you want to collect data about yellow fever. Now yellow fever is not so common in India. So the sentinel site for collection of this particular data would be located somewhere in US or any other country where this is very common. So this type of method is basically the sentinel surveillance. The next method is the scanning of the registries. Now here one must understand that registries are a large collection of data on patients who were treated with the drug. Therefore, it is easier to find out details pertaining to adverse events related to a particular drug from the registry. So all types of information pertaining to a particular drug and the adverse event related to the drug can be found in the registry. The third type of method is prescription event monitoring, which is also known as cohort event monitoring. Now in this method, if you compare with the other two methods like sentinel sites where you have specific site which is collecting data about disease, you have registries wherein you have to just go through the registry and collect data on adverse events. This cohort event monitoring as compared to these previous two methods is not such a straightforward method. So to understand this in greater detail, we will go to the next slide. Cohort event monitoring is a very important component of what you call as active surveillance. It is essentially the monitoring of events in a group of people. Cohort means group. So this is an observational study, which means you observe something, you observe the development of adverse events. It is a prospective type of evaluation, which means patients are studied and followed up from the time they begin their treatment. Inceptional, that is right from the day of treatment, they are being continuously monitored. It is also called dynamic type of monitoring because as you continue monitoring, new group of patients keep on adding to the cohort. It is a longitudinal type of a study, which means that over a period of time, over a long period of time, patients will be assessed, and it is descriptive because The events are identified, they are described, and their distribution is given in different subgroups. For example, in males there were 400 events, in females there were 200 events. So such kind of description is given as an outcome of this type of monitoring. So to understand cohort event monitoring, we must know that there are some 5 important steps in this process. The first step is implementation. Now at this stage what is done is a cohort event monitoring coordinator is appointed. Someone who will be responsible for the overall conduct of the study or the collection of the information. A pilot study is done to collect some preliminary data, and at this particular stage, that is at the stage of implementation, the reason why this cohort event monitoring is being conducted is explicitly defined. So basically at implementation, you set up the systems for carrying out the monitoring. The second step is establishing the cohort. Now this means you need to define your patient population. In what group of patients are you going to conduct this monitoring? Whether they are cancer patients, whether they are hypertensive patients, whether they are geriatric, whether they are pediatric, whether they are adult, you need to define your population. You will also have to decide how many patients you will enroll. Now typically for a cohort event monitoring, around 10,000 patients are included at a time. So you have to define your strategy as to how you're going to select the patients, how you're going to identify them, how you're going to enroll them. The third important step is to acquire the data from them and to maintain a database. So once you identify your population, you start collecting the data. Now once you start collecting the data, you have to maintain a database of all the data that is being collected. The fourth important step is clinical review. Now whatever data you have collected, whether it is clinically sound or not, whether it is complete or not, and that is assessed at the clinical review stage. Now what type of review is done? So clinical review is done by a medical doctor. Now what he assesses is whether this particular adverse event is clinically plausible or not. For example, if you have captured in the data that at 10:15 on a certain day the patient took a certain tablet, and then you mention that at 10:15 the patient experienced adverse event. Now is it possible to experience adverse event within 0 second of taking the drug? No, it is clinically not possible. So such kind of erroneous data entries are also checked. It is assessed whether clinically any adverse event is plausible or not as per what is reported in the data. So if such kind of data is there where the timing of taking the drug and the timing of adverse event are the same, that means that adverse event is not related to the drug. From the data itself it is, you can identify that. So these aspects are checked. Next is re-challenge and de-challenge. This is another important component which is assessed. Now what is re-challenge? Suppose you give a drug, okay, and there is a adverse event. So after there is adverse event, you stop the drug. Now, after you stop the drug, there is no adverse event. Then again after few days you start the drug, and then again there is an adverse event. So what is happening is you give the drug and there is adverse event. You stop the drug, there is no adverse event. Again you start the drug and there is adverse event. So if after starting the drug again there is an adverse event, then that is called as a positive re-challenge. So this data is captured and this is assessed by the clinical reviewer. What is de-challenge? De-challenge means you take a drug and there is an adverse event, and as soon as you notice that there is an adverse event, you stop that particular drug. So this process is called as de-challenge. So such type of data is reviewed by the clinical reviewer. And the final step then is the processing. The final step then is to process the data. So at that stage of processing of the data, what is done is a complete audit is done of the data and the quality control is done of that data to assess that it is not erroneous. I mean, whatever data is collected is sound and credible. The next important method is comparative observational studies. Now this includes use of study designs like cross-sectional, cohort and case control. Now we have learned all these study designs in pharmacoepidemiology. But as I said earlier, pharmacovigilance itself is a branch of pharmacoepidemiology. So all these study designs are used here as well. So in a cross-sectional study, a survey questionnaire is administered and data on adverse events is collected post-treatment from patients. In cohort study, the association between a drug and an adverse event is evaluated over a period of time. So how exactly is that done? You have a group of people who get the drug and then they are followed up over a period of time until they develop the adverse reactions. That is how they do the cohort study. In case of a case control, you have two groups, the cases, that is the one with the adverse events, and controls, that is the one without adverse events. For both the groups, the history of exposure to drug and other diseases is assessed to establish association between a particular drug and the adverse event. So basically what is done is retrospectively the medical records are checked, the exposure history is checked for the cases and controls to establish a association between the drug and the adverse event. The next type of method is targeted clinical investigation. Now this type of studies are conducted to confirm whether the toxicity is because of the drug itself or because of some interaction. For example, it is done to check whether the toxicity is because of altered pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamics in a patient. So pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic studies of that particular drug are done to see whether the toxicity is because of the altered pharmacokinetics. Next is the studies are done to assess interaction of the particular drug with the food. So food drug interaction studies are done. Next is it is assessed whether toxicity is because of some drug interaction. So drug interaction studies are done. Also sometimes toxicity can be seen in only some patients who have specific genetic mutations. So some genetic studies are also done in this targeted clinical investigations. The next method is called as descriptive method. Now in this, the natural history of a disease is studied. So for a group of people, especially who are at higher risk for that particular disease. The next type in descriptive study is a drug utilization study. So what is done is we basically assess the number of units of drug that are consumed. So for some class of drugs like antibiotics, this information is very important. What units of that drug are consumed. For example, in case of antibiotics, the consumption trend could be a useful indicator while predicting resistance pattern for that particular class of drug. So the very term descriptive means just a description is given. How much is consumed? How many units are consumed on a daily basis, on a monthly basis? So a kind of a description emerges out from the data analysis. The next method is based on a hypothesis or a theory. So there are basically two types of method as per this classification. The first is hypothesis generative method. The second is hypothesis verifying methods. The hypothesis basically is nothing but theory. Now if you have a look at the types of studies which are included in these methods, you will realize that it is similar to what you have already learned in the earlier classification as per ICH GCP. For example, in hypothesis generating method you have spontaneous reporting, which you have already learned in passive surveillance. Similarly, prescription event monitoring is also called as a cohort event monitoring, which is a part of active surveillance, which we have seen earlier. Similarly, we have also seen the scanning of registries. Also, in the hypothesis verifying studies, we have case control, crossover, cohort, which we have already seen as part of the comparative observational studies. So the outcome of this session is we have learnt the definition, aims and methods of pharmacovigilance. Now based on this, you should be able to answer the following questions, that is the definition of pharmacovigilance, explain the aims of pharmacovigilance, and enlist and explain the methods in pharmacovigilance. So that's all for now. In the next session, we will study about causality assessment and signal detection. Thank you.